Noita. It's a procedurally generated, pixel physics-based roguelite with a large customizable spell and wand set, where as you might expect, every pixel can be manipulated in some way. I have played around 23 hours now and I figured I'd make a review, but before I get into the nitty gritty, remember to sub if you haven't already, or my analytics get really sad. So for starters, the main positives that drive this game are, as you would expect, the pixel-based physics and the wand customization, at least in my opinion anyway. For the pixels, you can pretty much do what you want. Here you can see that if you set fire to things, it will actually spread across, flammable objects. And if there's oil, it will ignite, as well as the oil can actually overflow and will then head down to a level ground area, which is really cool. And the same applies to water. If you want to flood areas, you can do that. And with coal and snow, you can dig through them with certain spells, or you can set them on fire. The second strong positive for this game that I wanted to get in early was the wand and spell customization. You can start off with generally quite a weak wand, but throughout the levels replace bits or replace the wand itself, and end up with a really strong wand and just make crazy spells. Although do be aware, as some enemies can actually pick up the wands that you can find throughout the levels, so if you notice that a wand stand is missing the wand, keep an eye out for a magic missile flying your way, or something else that could turn out to be really nasty. The combat and level design is fairly basic, though don't let that sound like a bad thing. It's all procedurally generated, so it's never going to be the same thing twice, which is pretty cool for a roguelike game. Especially for one that doesn't follow the usual room by room approach, it's quite refreshing, however I did find some issue with it which I will come back to later. The combat is fairly obviously blast your enemies with your wand. You can also find items and use tricks if you want to get a trick kill. Killing an enemy with terrain, for example, counts as a trick kill, and you actually get double gold if you manage to do that. So if you get a nice sweet rock kill, you get paid twice. The levels will gradually get more and more difficult, with enemies becoming both harder to kill and more in number. Though again I found issue with this and I will come back to that. They start as fairly easy one-hit mobs, and eventually, depending on your run, they can take many hits before finally dying. And that might be one of many enemies. Each level, once you get through the portal, will have a shop and HP spell refresher so that you can head out again with full HP and spells. There are also perks you can get that range from taking no fire damage, telekinetic kicks, spider legs growing from your back, and even an angry little ghost that follows you around. There are also sometimes traps scattered around, sometimes they even seem like complete bullshit like here. I'm going for a chest, minding my own business, and then zap, haha, you are dead. And that's pretty much Noita in a nutshell in that one clip. You might just be casually, memeing around, and then, you're dead. Just something happens to kill you out of nowhere. There is a catch in this game to being a completionist. The longer you take per level, there is a worm that digs its way around the levels behind you, and if you take too long, it will catch up to the shop that you will be at, and you will see a message that says, "You have angered the gods." And then you have to fight some sort of weird mini-boss, and if you don't have a good wand, it will most likely kill you, as he does quite a bit of damage. So just bear that in mind. So, to sum up the positives of this game that I enjoyed, I actually did like almost all of the game. I really enjoyed the pixel-based physics and how often I found myself just blowing stuff up or digging around for the fun of it, as it was just fun to interact with the world. I enjoyed the wand customization 100%, some of the stuff that you can do is just kinda nuts, and you end up sometimes even killing yourself, which is also pretty fun, weirdly enough. It's also procedurally generated, so it's never going to be the same unless you happen to get the same seed, but that is very unlikely that would ever happen. The game design itself, from sound to art style, really fit what the game has going for it. I'm not really sure it would work if it wasn't a pixel art styled game. Now for the negatives, and bear with me for a moment as I want to explain this in full, the big negative that I personally dislike about this game, and that is the difficulty climb, and the way the game manages it. So as you may notice, every level is basically small narrow tunnels leading from one to the next, and around the third layer, which is the snowy ice layer, these little fuckers show up, and they show up usually in massive numbers, so they are already a huge spike in difficulty in comparison with the previous levels. And unless you have an OP fire and forget wand, they will most likely become something that can kill you even in the harder levels later on. When you get even further into the game, it adds even more enemies to the point where in the final level, and even a couple before that, there's just, in my opinion, too many enemies unless you want to cheese it, which feels kind of cheap for a roguelike game. If they made the levels longer further on, and maybe added some more traps and harder enemies instead of just the volume of enemies being a lot bigger, I think it would feel a lot better, and in my opinion would make it a more rewarding roguelike game. As my experience with the game so far is late game there'll be 20 enemies in one room, if you get hit by even one of those you might get stunned, and if you fall down after you get stunned you're pretty much going to die because all the other 20 of them will just be waiting to hit you as well. It was honestly the one thing about this game I genuinely did hate. It was just bad design of difficulty curve through intentional swarming of the player in a way that ramped up massively towards the end for no other reason, in my opinion, than to make it a notoriously hard game. There's lots of other roguelites out there and other games that are really hard, or more difficult should I say, and they don't need to do that. Like I've played Ghost Runner, I've played Enter the Gungeon, I've played Undermine, I've played many other, generally quite hard games, and they seem to manage the difficulty a lot better than this. It always feels like there's an option or some kind of skill you can use to make yourself generally a better player at that particular game. And 23 hours into this, I don't really feel like there's much of an option for that in this game. It's pretty much just either get lucky or die trying. That's my two options, and so far I've died trying. And I would consider playing a game for 23 hours more than giving it a chance. Now you might agree or disagree, but that's my opinion. It was one of the biggest things of the game that made me not want to play as much as I probably otherwise would have done. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that makes Noita a bad game. If you think that you will enjoy the combat, pixel manipulation and the customization, this might be a game for you. However, for now, I would say if you aren't too sure on it, wait for it to go on sale. It does go on sale now and again. I really hope in the future that they change the final levels to be better designed and not rely so much on swarming to make it a hard game. Other than that, it's a really great game. But that is the end of this review, and I will see you for the next one.